The EMOVE Roadrunner is an awesome product. I mean, just look at it. A mini bike style PEV that goes over 30 miles an hour? What's not to like? The design is simple and straightforward while still turning heads because it's unlike almost anything else on the PEV market. But is it worth its fairly steep price tag of almost $1,800, or is it just a gimmick? Because this is unlike any other PEV I've tested before, it initially seemed like it would be hard to compare it to other products. I was tempted to treat it like an e-bike and compare it in that way, which is actually what Voro Motor does on their Roadrunner product page. However, after riding it, it's obvious that this is much more like a small seated electric scooter than like an e-bike, and would most likely appeal to the same group of people that primarily ride e-scooters. There's no bike drivetrain, no pedaling, smaller wheels, a compact size, and just about everything screams e-scooter rather than e-bike. Performance-wise, you get specs comparable to, maybe a bit lower, than other electric scooters at this price. It has dual hub motors, a 500 watt motor in the rear, 350 watt motor in the front, and is powered by a 48 volt 26.1 amp hour battery. Comes with a thumb throttle and has the typical riding flexibility of other dual motor e-scooters with the option to ride in single or dual motor mode. Plus, there are 3 different riding levels to cap your top speed. Uncapped in dual motor mode, it reaches 30 miles an hour relatively easily and can stretch towards 32, 33, and even 34 miles an hour in the right conditions. It doesn't have the same neck-snapping acceleration that dual 1000 watt e-scooters around this price have, and I personally would have liked a little more power off the line, but it does just fine. Once it gets going, however, the acceleration curve steepens quite a bit and shoots up to the higher speeds relatively quickly. The 26.1 amp hour battery offers fantastic range. Riding in the max speed dual motor mode, I was able to get over 26 miles of range, a minimum range that is head and shoulders above other scooters I've tested at this price point. Range can be stretched out significantly as well by riding in a lower mode, and you can almost double your range by riding in the single motor mode. The brakes and braking power are some of the Roadrunner's weakest points, however. These X-Tech mechanical brakes have some of the most finicky calipers that I've ever had to deal with. They required a crazy amount of adjusting and tweaking out of the box to even get running semi-decently. The first issue I had was a loud metallic chunking and grinding sound from the back brake when the wheel would rotate. I knew that just the brake pad rubbing on the disc wouldn't make that sound, but it took me a while to realize that it was being caused by the disc bottoming out in the caliper. When the brake was installed, it was mounted too low, and adjusting the location of the brake bracket fixed the issue. I still had a ton of brake rubbing and spent quite a bit of time adjusting the caliper and bending the disc back into place. I honestly never got them perfect because the wheels also don't rotate quite true. I get a little bit of rubbing on both brakes no matter how I adjust them. Now, I did receive a review unit that appears to have been used before I got it. So between being used and having been shipped a number of times, it's very possible that the wheels have been warped and bent a little over time and in the shipping process. Hopefully new units aren't arriving like this. Even adjusted properly, the brakes are mediocre at best. You have to brake with both the front and rear brakes simultaneously and pretty aggressively to stop in any reasonable amount of time. Using both brakes is a good practice no matter what, but it would have been nice to see a little better rear single brake braking for small speed adjustments. Hydraulic brakes would offer better stopping time and would require much less day-to-day tweaking as the pads wear down. Hydraulic brake levers just feel better as well. Generally speaking though, this is a very fun PEV and feels especially fast because of how low to the ground it rides. This is obviously a very small scooter, but it doesn't feel overly small to ride even for taller riders. I'm 6'1" and feel totally fine on it even on longer rides. It has a saddle style seat long enough to give you some wiggle room in how far you want to sit from the handlebars, and the handlebars come with an adjustable stem. The foot pegs are a good distance from the seat and wide enough for my feet. I was pleasantly surprised at how reasonable the riding position is. The folding handlebars are plenty wide for a nice stable position and good control of the scooter. The handlebar grips are pretty awful, sliding and rotating around the bars quite a bit, but are easy to replace with your own grips. The biggest area where this PEV is worse than a standing e-scooter is in shock absorption and general ride comfort. The Roadrunner has a small front spring suspension fork that offers maybe 30 or 40 millimeter of travel. The 14-inch tube pneumatic tires do offer a bit of impact absorption, but with no rear suspension and no significant amount of front suspension, even small bumps can be insanely jarring. Riding seated means that every little bump goes directly up into your butt and through your body. Normally, smaller wheels and smaller suspension is okay on electric scooters because your legs can act as a form of suspension, but you don't get any such luxury with the Roadrunner. Let me tell you, I jangled my nads quite a few times. It was the worst on sidewalks with constant cracks and uneven concrete, but I got jangled a few times in bike lanes as well because of potholes and manhole covers. Most of the time I had to ride significantly slower than I would have otherwise and pay super close attention to the ground and where I was riding. The times where I had a nice smooth stretch of road or sidewalk were amazing though, and a ton of fun. This thing can really cook when you aren't worried about bumps. Just imagine it with rear coil shocks like this, giving it a little more floaty feel and the ability to handle bumps better. I think that alone would make this a very strong recommendation from me. But even with its bumpy ride, the Roadrunner is a blast to ride, and there are actually some good reasons to get this over a regular e-scooter. Its small size and reasonable weight makes it nearly as portable as a typical folding e-scooter, fitting in the back of my sedan just as well as other larger dual-motor scooters. The folding handlebars do help get the size down to a reasonable level, and while nothing else folds, the handlebars alone offer relevant size reduction. Being as portable as a folding scooter while offering a seated position is relevant for those that use a scooter for part of their commute and want to ride in a seated position. The seated position is much more intuitive for most people, so that alone might be enough of a draw. The low to the ground riding position also makes it very low profile, optimal for riding to college and around campus, and it's easy to lock up at a bike rack with plenty of places on the frame to wrap a chain or U-lock. The Roadrunner's other features are pretty standard, so I'll run through them quickly. It comes with a fairly small front light that is basically the bare minimum you would need to get home in the dark. The folding bars do make it a bit awkward to add additional lights, but you could easily replace the included one with a bit more light or a wider beam, and also add one to your helmet if you're regularly riding during the night. The rear light has two smaller red lights that are always on when the scooter's on, and the larger bar lights up when braking and when the lights are on. There's also a set of turn signals visible from the rear, but they are hard to see during the day, especially from a car with how low to the ground the Roadrunner is. It is better to have them than not, so I'm not complaining. The battery is fully removable, making charging easy and also allowing you to swap the battery for a new one. The range on this is so good that I can't think of a ton of scenarios where you would really need an extra charged battery right away, but it is an option available. Extra batteries are for sale on Voro Motors website, and they're $500 a piece. My only other fringe complaint with this scooter is the poorly utilized space in the frame. I understand that having an empty frame like this helps keep the weight down, but it would have been awesome to have a spot to store personal items in the space in front of the seat. Having a basket or bucket or even lockable compartment would be amazing, and it really wouldn't affect the weight in any significant way. There's even space to put storage under the seat like a moped potentially. Overall, I had a ton of fun riding the Roadrunner. It's a fast, unique PEV that brings a new creative option into the electric vehicle space. At $1,800, I think it does offer enough to give other e-scooters at this price point a run for their money, and if you want a fast, seated e-scooter, there really isn't anything like this at this price. You can check it out down at the link below. Be sure to subscribe for more PEV content, and I will see you in the next one.